My name's Karen Frankel, and I'm bringing you my thoughts and ideas and lessons on creativity and drawing in particular. I have a belief that being able to draw from birth is an absolute myth. It's not true that you can do it or can't do it, and my passion is to dispel that myth and bring you my thoughts on it. So today I'm going to be talking about something that is very dear to my heart, which is all surrounding our self-esteem about ourselves and our creativity, and why we have this self-judgment, and how we can get beyond that. Give you some information about adult learners. Us as adult learners have a particular way of thinking about learning that children don't have, and it is not particularly helpful. So I'm going to share some of those thoughts with you, and hopefully they'll be helpful to you in your creative journey. I can't see anyone on yet, so let me know when you get here. I hope you're enjoying this on the replay. A little bit of my story. I consider myself an artist, but I haven't always done that. And labeling myself an artist is actually not that important in the bigger scheme of things, so I try to encourage people not to try and define yourself like that. But we're all human, and I'm human, and it was a big part of what I needed to do for myself. My father was an artist. I grew up in a household with his work all over the place, and he was definitely a mentor to me, especially when I started taking my art more seriously. And when I did start taking my art more seriously, I had this small little voice in my head saying, "You're not an artist. How can you compare yourself to your father? How can you teach art when you're not as good as him?" And I had all of these self-critical things going on, and none of them were particularly helpful at all. That started to dispel a little bit when I actually began having conversations with my father as artist to artist. And I got the feeling from him that he valued my contributions, he valued my artwork, but mostly he saw me in an I was going to say equal place, and then I was thinking, oh no, surely I wasn't equal to him. So there's my little judgmental mind going on again. But it was an absolute privilege and a profound feeling to have those discussions with him as artist to artist, as creative to creative. He valued my comments, not as criticism, but as an ongoing discussion. So it was a really beautiful part of my relationship with him. More than that, as a teacher of art, I've been teaching now for about 15 years. As a teacher of art, I often questioned, how good is my art? Who am I to be teaching art, to be giving information? And I sometimes question myself on that as well. But the resounding response from from my students who are artists to my teaching was reinforcement that I was connecting with people. And so that helped me to quieten my judgmental voice. So we all have that voice. I believe no matter how good, again, in inverted commas, you are, you will have that questioning voice. And I don't think there's anything wrong with it, as long as it doesn't prevent you from continuing on your creative journey. It is not a prerequisite that you are good or at a certain level before you can consider yourself a drawer or a painter or somebody that loves being creative. So don't get caught up in the labeling of yourself. It doesn't really matter. And in in regard to the classes that I run, which is drawing mainly, although I do run workshops in other disciplines, mixed media and painting, the fact that you are good or not good is not a fact actually, and it has no bearing whatsoever on your enjoyment of that creative journey and on your learning. So it's really not very helpful to place that restriction on yourself. Excuse me, cheers. Judgment, when my students walk in at the door, especially when I run a workshop for new students, I can actually feel the self-judgment. And when I ask people about where they've come from, how they've come to the creative path, why they want to continue or begin it, a lot of the time I hear words like, well, hello, somebody's joined me, give me a wave, tell me who you are. I often ask and they say, oh, my father or my mother or my brother or my sister is an artist and I'd love to be that good, or I'll never be that good. And already they are beginning to compare themselves to somebody other than themselves. And that can be sketches that they see in a book, artists that they see on TV, Aunt Doe, oh, I'll never be that good, so why do I need to bother? And the bother is for yourself and not for you to show other people how good you are. Unless you want to show people how excited you are about your work, it's not about a labeling and a judgment. And we are so much more self-judging than other people. So give yourselves a break when it comes to judging. Don't compare yourself to other students in the class. Don't compare yourself to anyone for that matter. It is not really a useful thing to do. I have had some students leave the class after a term saying that they didn't get where they wanted to be. They wanted to be better than they were at the end of the class, and that was proof enough to them that they weren't good at it, and why bother? So I see that all the time, and it always disappoints me, because very often the people that are saying that are the people that are enjoying the work and are growing through it and are producing some lovely work. Now, when I say producing some lovely work, that is absolutely a reaction from me and the rest of the students and other people to their work. It has no judgment on how good or bad it is. It is something that delights the senses, and often the students don't want to believe that because they have an expectation that their work should be, there's that dreadful word should, that their work should be at a certain level. Otherwise it's no good. And again, it's very self-defeating. Give yourselves a break. Understand that you are at a certain stage, often at the beginning of your creative journey. We tend to think that we should be better than we are. And where does that come from? You know, when I go back to the tennis analogy, if you've never played a game of tennis before, if you've never picked up a racket and hit the ball, you don't have an expectation that you can do it until you learn how to do it, until you practice. And drawing and being creative is exactly the same. Do it for the pleasure of the process. My students often hear that phrase. There, as far as I'm concerned, there isn't another reason for doing it. If you're not enjoying it, why are you bothering? I have, over the years, done a little bit of research, or just my own personal reading up. Just quietly, I'm a bit of a science nerd, and when the whole neuroplasticity science came about, which is the understanding that the brain is constantly learning, constantly growing, constantly changing to enable you to understand your work differently, grow, learn more. I was really, really excited, because what it meant was no matter how old you are, you can still learn, and you can still grow your brain. It's not the same as your aging arthritic fingers and that sort of thing. And what actually happens is the little neurons and the millions and millions of nerves and things in your brain. I don't really understand it perfectly, but I do understand that there are pathways that grow in your brain, and new neurons grow. Excuse me if I've got the wrong terminology, but new pathways grow and get stronger in your brain every time you learn something new. So you often hear that learning a language or learning something new is extraordinarily good for you as you age, keeping your brain young, staving off dementia. So that's because your brain is able to change and grow. That's where the word plasticity comes from. It's plastic. It can get fired up. And the same is happening when you are learning to draw. When you practice something like drawing, your brain develops these new pathways, and then when you come back to your drawing, the stronger the pathways are, the more easy you find the task. And that brings me to an understanding of why some adult learners, and I include myself, are so hard on themselves when learning, and in my case, when learning to draw. As adult learners, we have a certain lifetime of experience before us, we have education before us, and if we go to a drawing class, we can understand very well what the teacher is saying to us, we understand the concepts, we watch a demonstration, and it all looks very easy. And we wonder why, when we go back to our desk to try and perform the same task or a similar task or an exercise that the teacher has given us, we wonder why we can't do it like the teacher. And we understand it, we can see it looks easy, we've been given clear instructions, we have the same materials, why can't we do it? And the answer really is we haven't developed those pathways yet. The teacher has worked on their work, has taught, has been a practitioner of their art for many, many years, most of the time, and their pathways are very strong, and they have developed them and are able to do it easily. It wasn't easy when they started, and it's not easy when you start, but there's an overwhelming sense of, I should be able to follow instructions and just do it as well as my teacher, or as well as somebody that I'm watching who's been in the class for 10 years, or even a term ahead of us. And not only is there that time that we haven't given ourselves, everyone starts from a different point of view. So some people may have had more exposure, like I had. I had more exposure to my dad, who was an artist around me, and I learned by osmosis, really. We didn't really have lessons. So everyone is at a different place when they begin this journey. So it is, once again, not important to compare yourselves. And it is a thing that you should give yourselves a break on. Realize that this is the very first steps, especially in the beginning, of you on this journey. And how could you possibly be better than you are when you haven't taken more steps? And how can you run before you've learned to walk? How can you run a marathon before you've learned to run? And all of these things we understand in the context of sport and that sort of thing, but we seem to have a roadblock when it comes to being creative. We expect that we can either do it or we can't do it. So it's the expectation of whether we're good or bad, and the labeling of that that prevents us often from continuing on this creative journey. And so what I'm saying to you is try to not do that. Enjoy the process. Take it from whence it comes. Excuse me. Most artists, all artists that I know about, have crappy days, have times when their drawings are not what they would like to show off, are not what they need to be, and you don't usually know about that. So that's part of my story. It's part of most artists' story. You don't get to see those crappy days and those crappy sketches and those paintings that don't work, and you only see the ones that we choose to display, like that painting behind me. It's one of my favorites. So you don't get to see the bad, the journey part of the way. You don't get to see the writer's first attempt at a manuscript. You only get to see the end result. So give yourself a break and understand that what you are doing is important for the pleasure of it, and it's important for the doing, and your growth will come out of that, and your practice will come out of that, and you will slowly get to where you will then consider that the end result is what you wanted. But in the meantime, enjoy the process, enjoy the journey, and you've got a bigger chance of enjoying that end result. So I hope you enjoyed this little video today and you get something out of it and you give yourself a break. I'll be seeing you next Friday at 10 a.m. If you would like to join our Facebook group, just send me a Facebook request. It's called Get Drawing, and there's a place there where you can share your work, where you can ask me questions about how to improve your work. Share your bad things. Share your beginner things, not your bad things. I'd love to see them. Other people will be very supportive. We're all on this journey together. I know it's a bit of a cliche. It's about the journey and not the destination, but your destination will be fabulous when you get there if you enjoy the journey. See you next time. Get drawing.